Welcome to another Figure Week, Art Surface Week, Organic Week.
Hey everyone, my name is Ahmed Aldouri. I'm a concept artist and former instructor at Art Center College of Design, Brainstorm, CCS, CGMA, and various other places. And I would like to introduce to you this digital painting course that I've created. But before we get into anything, I just want to thank you for the support you've all given me this whole time. And with the support of so many of you, I've been able to put together everything I know about painting into this digital painting course. You want to become a pro illustrator, concept artist, or even just a hobbyist, but you don't have a clear map to get there. And that's where I come in. I spent the last 6 months compiling everything I know from my 20 years of art practice, and I've turned it all into a map. Starting with foundations such as rendering shapes, color theory, painting basic subjects, understanding brushwork, brush economy, all that fun stuff. Deconstructing the skull, drawing it from every angle, all the way to master studies, stylized painting, and you'll find yourself at the end of the course doing a concept art project based on everything that we learn in the first 14 lessons. So how does it work? Well, you sign up, you watch the lectures, do the assignments, post them to the community page if you want, and treat it as a self-study, except for those of you who have signed up for the weekly meeting, where I personally critique your work in a virtual classroom setting. I believe learning by repetition is super important. That's what I've sort of presented a lot in this course, and the assignments are tailored for that, as adapted from my time teaching at Art Center. And each of these lessons have step-by-step explanations in real time. If you've ever seen my videos, you know exactly how I teach. And this course is intended to be a substitute for a college level course, but you don't have to pay the $4,000 or $5,000 per class, racking up maybe $200K in debt. With my custom design course, you'd be paying a fraction of that. And of course, I also have payment plan options if you don't want to pay for the whole thing at once. Thank you for watching this, and I'll see you soon.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Digital Artcast. Thanks for joining me again. Once of all, as we talk about in these episodes, I hope whatever's going on in the world, you guys are staying safe, and of course, hoping that the podcast is your kind of escape or relaxing time that you can drift away and listen to us chat about art and everything related to it, and it kind of helps you get through the day, the week, the month, whatever's bothering you at the moment. Again, another amazing episode. One of these ones that we've had recently where we have returning guests, so people who have been on before previously and came back a second time round to talk about art and what they've been up to since we've seen them last. And today's guest was very special indeed to me personally, because he was one of the first guests we ever had on Digital Artcast. When I started the podcast back in 2015, 2016, going to my first few events in London, this guest was a speaker there at the time that we kind of got in contact with at the time and asked if they would come on, and they were very generous with their time. So yeah, it's great to have returning guests, especially ones that have a history with the podcast. So today we have on Mr. Marek Madej. Hey Marek, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm glad to have you back. It's round 2 with us. Like I said, the last time you spoke on the podcast, you had just finished a major title as well that you were talking about in London at Industry Workshops. And then again, you have just finished another one, and now you're back out to the world again. So for anybody who doesn't know you, can you tell us who you are and what you do currently?
I'm primarily a concept artist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if people are like using that thing, if like senior, like principal, lead,
Right.
like I don't necessarily like that kind of like labeling me myself, or like
Right.
because I, even though I primarily do concept art, I also do illustration
Mm-hmm.
and some other stuff from time to time. So
Right.
for the past 10 years, I was working as a like senior concept artist, like principal concept artist
Mm-hmm.
at CD Projekt Red. That's actually changed recently because now I just started basically last month at new studio, which is called People Can Fly.
Cool.
The games that people can recognize them from are like Bulletstorm by Painkiller, and recently was Outriders.
Mm-hmm.
So right now I'm working with them, but as I mentioned, like people primarily might know me from my work on Witcher, like basically Witcher 3 with expansion packs, Gwent, and Cyberpunk
Cyberpunk. Yeah.
2077.
Yeah. I mean, Cyberpunk's obviously been a big thing as well, and Witcher even back then was when you guys were talking about it in London was huge as well, because Witcher 3 kind of took over the world at one point as well. But yeah, you've been in some big projects, man. It's been impressive. And
Yeah, but like that's the thing. It's like Witcher 3 was like just like so like it was a surprise for many people how like what was the reception of the project, like because
right.
obviously everybody was excited to work on that project, everybody was doing their best, but
Mm-hmm.
the outcome just like mind blowing for everybody, I guess. Like and then like for the comparison, like with the Cyberpunk 2077, like you just like would think that everything would go as planned, everything would be great. Like I still think that like in terms of like visuals and the stuff that like I was personally working on,
Oh
like
yeah.
people actually enjoying the game, and they like what was the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
But even with the best team, like you might end up with something that was like not necessarily what we would imagine at the beginning.
I think the project Cyberpunk itself was extremely well executed in the sense that the art direction was incredible, and I think the world you built was fantastic. I think it's just the fact that, unfortunately, it seemed like at the end it was kind of rushed out, and there was things that weren't 100%. And I mean, it is what it is. I don't want to dive too much into that because obviously you can't hold too much responsibility to that. You weren't in charge. You weren't really headlining that. But I think, like you said, the art was the thing that was definitely well executed on. I think the world you built and the visual style was very successful.
Yeah, and the thing is, like when you're working on a like big project, like it's as an artist especially, even though like you might like have some impact on the on like the elements in the game,
Mm-hmm.
like you barely like how to describe it, like you might have like some input to like where the game might go in terms of like certain things,
Right.
but overall like you have like so many people that have like impact on the project that uh, even though I might feel kind of like responsible for the failure of the game, even though it was like just like okay, maybe
When you
I'm
weren't the
just
game director, you weren't really making those
yeah.
high level decisions that were
Yeah, but like
impacting stuff.
the project in the end is like the mixture of like everybody in the team, like
Mhm.
actually working together. Like you might have like the best people in the world, but if they will not work good as a team, like you might
Right.
also end up with a project that might be not satisfying. Like because if you have like everybody would like to go in like different direction with the stuff that they are working
Mhm.
with they are doing for the project, then
I think it was very ambitious as well, what you guys were building. It was a big reach to think about how much you were trying to accomplish in such a short span of time. And there's been a couple of games over the last couple of years that have maybe fallen to that as well. I mean, like, the one I think of off the top of my head is Anthem, that EA was putting out at one point, and that kind of, in a sense, kind of suffered the same fate in the fact that they were trying to build such a massive world and a huge, lore behind it. But, the team maybe struggled at times because, like you said, it was all the cogs weren't turning correctly and things weren't getting done on time. And
I don't necessarily know what was like happening with the Anthem. Like, I just like I saw maybe one article about the project, but like every single, like, even though you have like the same company, like sometimes you might have like different people in different positions, like something might change and the whole dynamics of the project and
can shift.
The team actually might just change a bit. So it's hard to judge. And then
I mean, I think it's great now, the fact that we've come to present day and we look at Cyberpunk now, and with the new patch that came out recently, like, the game has kind of redeemed itself, where, everything that they kind of promised, or a lot of things that were initially bad, have kind of now been fixed, and things are running a bit smoother, and the game's kind of up and running to a stage where it's very playable, it's very good. A lot of people are now saying it's great to dive back in, but it then took them that last year to really push out that aspect of content.
I can also like see that, like, in especially recent months, like the perception of the game actually changed. Like, maybe not on like the most popular like game outlets, like they like, there you can still find people just like complaining about the game, not even like, and then admitting that they didn't even like play it. That was like crazy. The amount of like comments, like basically saying bad stuff about the game and then admitting that they didn't even play the game. That was like crazy. But I
was just going to say, I had a friend like that, exactly the same. He was like, Cyberpunk trash, blah blah. I said, no, have you played it? And he was like, nah, I never bothered buying. I was like,
But also, like, after Cyberpunk, my approach to like reading the information about the project that I'm working on actually changed, because during The Witcher 3 and after The Witcher 3, like, I was reading almost everything that I could find. Like, during the production of Cyberpunk, that was the same thing. But after the release, there was like so much stuff that was just straightforward, like, negative. And then I was even checking the Google Analytics, and then it was just like, if you wanted to have like some views on YouTube, you just posting like some video about like Cyberpunk, like complaining about it, and then like people are like, and I know that actually it's kind of like a reading or watching like negative stuff is like, so in some way like addictive. Like, like, you watch one thing and then for some reason you just like reaching for another one and another one, and it's like and then with that stuff, like, I reached like this point when I was like, okay, that's enough. And then I like kind of
shut the internet
learn
off.
how to not care that much. Like, don't get me wrong, I still, if somebody has like some constructive criticism, I will read it, and I will try, if like that's something around my field, like, I will try to apply it or share it with, that's something from the gameplay side. I will,
as long as it's
talk with
people
that are from the gameplay, and then like talking what was the reception and then what people like think. But
I think it's hard to switch your brain off and not feel anything, when you spent what was probably 45 years of your life on something. It's, especially I think because people in the studio probably were super hyped about it and, were excited to get it out. And, when it released and there was the whole backlash, it almost would be like, the studio atmosphere would be really somber and people would be like, oh shit, and, what do we do now? And, I mean, it's hard to talk about that because you only touched one piece of it. It's like, it's hard to really take on the view like what you thought the studio was thinking at the time. But then, was it a thing once it was released? You guys felt bad, or kind of like you felt that like you had done something wrong, even though you hadn't? You know what I mean? Like,
I think like lots of people are like just mainly disappointed, like because when you're working on a game, like it's not like everybody has like a full picture of like where the game is actually,
the direction. Yeah.
And then even like like I don't know what I like.
It's hard
Like,
because there's so many moving pieces, I think, right? You can only
yeah, like
see your part.
like not only because like I actually with Cyberpunk, I was helping with like checking out some visual stuff for
Right.
the reporting bugs and that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. Like as a
Mhm.
concept artist, at the end of the project, like there is not much that you are actually doing,
Right. The
except
design
of
stuff's
like
kind of been done.
some like
Yeah.
like helping with some additional stuff,
Yeah.
or like you're already working on something else.
Hmm.
But yeah, that there is this thing that like you kind of like sometimes have this situation where you talk with somebody and then like just like somebody is comparing it to the previous project, and then
Hmm.
like telling you that like you should be you shouldn't worry because it worked out like the last time, and then
Yeah.
yeah.
Doesn't really always work like that. Yeah. It's, I mean, that was the thing with Anthem we were just talking about, and I know from what I've read, I don't know anybody personally at the studio, but I mean, I know two people, but again, I've not talked to them in depth about what happened. But from what I saw, article wise, the idea was that they thought they would just push it out as it was done and then patch it as it went. But then, of course, because it was so broken at the start, they never really redeemed it. And then what didn't help is that the studio then pulled back resources. So they took people off the project, and they kept taking people off the project until there was only like, it went from like 150 people to like 20, and then there was nothing left to basically hold the game up. So yeah, I think people sometimes get a bit over reaching and thinking that they can build this thing. And I think they only had like 2.5 years to build it as well. People were saying long before Anthem shipped that like it wasn't ready, and nobody listened. The senior team didn't listen to MD basically. So, what can you do? So yeah, it's unfortunate.
I'm that and that like that's the thing. It's like I'm not a businessman, like
Mhm.
even though like after all these years in the industry, like I learned my stuff around
Mhm.
like money and that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
like like having like company or like the studio that size, like
Mhm.
that must be
It's a big
like
responsibility.
yeah, like on one side, like it's easy to judge like the decisions and stuff, but
Of
then
course.
when you also need to think about like you know
Mhm.
BioWare is like owned by EA, so
Yeah.
uh, EA is like a big corporation that like
Mm.
it's a kind of like another situation. But like imagine like being like independent studio, and then you need to be like you need to worry about, or like maybe you don't have to, but like
Yeah.
probably like if I would be in that situation where I had to
To
think
run the whole
about
thing.
like running the stuff, and then money aspect of the like running the studio, and then
Oh
so
yeah.
on,
It's a lot.
that would be definitely not it's not for me,
I mean, it's
like
it's really interesting as well because the last couple of years watching stuff like the no clip documentaries and Danny really putting a spotlight on the studio and talking to Marcin, who obviously co-founded the studio, and from what they started with, which was basically selling pirated games in Poland, to being one of the biggest studios in Europe that makes these AAA. I mean, because The Witcher done so well. I think it's sometimes hard, I think, when you scale so quickly. I think because they went from Witcher 3, which had such a huge, buzz about it, and then with Cyberpunk being the next thing, people were expecting great things, and you kind of wish sometimes that Witcher maybe hadn't done as well, because then, like, the expectation would have maybe not been as big, but it's good that they were then starting to compete, as a Polish studio with studios in America that obviously had a long-running situation with games as well, so you've got to take the good with the bad when it comes to that stuff.
but also like I guess like in this situation, I think like thinking about like failures that like probably you need to go through to actually learn your lessons. And like I don't say that like CD Projekt as a company didn't have like its own failures and then lessons that like they learn from, but sometimes you need to have like the right one in the right moment, and
A
then
bit of
like
humility. Yeah.
maybe like Cyberpunk, that's gonna be that lesson. I don't know, like that's the thing. Like there is like stuff that probably I shouldn't discuss, but also like there are like some things that like I kind of I have like my personal like an emotional attachment to the studio because I spent like 10 years at the
A long
studio.
time. Yeah. Long
So
time.
like for me, even though like I don't work there anymore, it's like I still feel like you know like that studio actually gave me a lot. And also like because I don't know if I would be in like place in life and like in
Oh,
terms
of
of like
course.
my career without this
Yeah.
without working at the studio. Like obviously I gave back my time to the studio and what I was able to provide. I learned a lot from the people that were that and are still working in the studio. So
I mean, say what you want about what happened with the end result, but everybody still knows what an incredible studio CD Projekt Red is. Even the fact that they have so many other things going on apart from just their games. Like even with GOG and stuff like that, and the DMRA free stuff that they put out. I mean, like they do a lot of things amazingly. It's and Witcher, of course, was so well received, and the free DLC and the whole fact that they've done that as no additional cost to the players. Like they've done a lot of good the last
yeah.
couple of years. I mean, I think it's hard when you see such an amazing entity like CD Projekt Red go through that bad time, and then that is kind of what the only thing people think about it, right? Is the bad thing, whereas for the last 10 years they've been an incredible studio. I mean,
But like at the end of the day, it's not the studio that is making the game.
mhm.
The like people that are like working for the studio are making the game. So
Yes,
if
100%.
you have like a couple of changes in like middle management, even sometimes like
Yeah,
it can actually change a lot when it
of
comes
course.
to like the maybe not the feeling of the game, but like some of the stuff that like
Mhm.
you will end up with in the game.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, to move on for that, because I think we've said our
Yeah.
piece and all we really can about that. But yeah, so concept artists. So obviously, like you said when we first met, you were at industry workshops and you were talking about Witcher at the time. And it's a job that you've now done, of course, for the last 5 years since we last talked. Um, we had a conversation not too long ago when we were starting to talk about you coming back in the podcast, where you had talked to a student about, or a thing that a student said to you was he felt like concept art in its current form was almost as difficult as obtaining a major role in a movie, like being an actor, trying to get into a film. Like he felt it was on that level. Do you feel, I mean, I think you touched on it briefly when we talked about it, but do you feel that's relevant? Do you think that the way concept art is went now, the field is even more competitive?
I think so. That like on one side, like you have like more and more jobs out there, like
Hmm.
for people, but the awareness of the like of that kind of job, and it's not even about like being like a concept artist, but I think even like a character artist, like all of the uh, positions like inside of the game industry that like are maybe more obvious and then sound fun,
Hmm.
because uh, quest designer or game designer is like kind of sounds like more vague, and then it's like hard to understand
Hmm.
what the job is about. Like people can probably like there is a person that actually come up with the ideas for the game, but they don't necessarily understand how it's done. And then that's actually game designer is not only like like coming up with ideas, but actually needs to do something in the engine. But like from the art side, like concept artist is like the stuff that like people obviously like maybe not everybody knows that like what concept art is, because like you have like probably a lot of gamers that they know that like there are like some people that doing like visuals for the game, but they don't necessarily understand how the
How they're put together.
how it put like who is doing what, or like how much time it takes, or that like what kind of software that they use. Like I still hear many times that like, oh, it's like programmers are doing the games.
Yeah.
So like, even the visuals, so
Yeah.
but I would say that that the amount of people that are aware of like this thing being actual job right now, it's way bigger, and that's cool.
Yeah. I
But
mean, art
then
books have probably helped with that as well, right?
yeah, like you also have like schools now that are teaching like game design, or like I was even teaching in Warsaw at the university, and
Yeah.
I'm like that was not focused only on games, but
Right.
uh, it had some uh, some of the workshops inside of the curriculum
Right.
that were like more targeted towards games, and I was like teaching like concept art,
Hmm.
like storyboarding, and that's that kind of stuff. It wasn't like super specialized. It
Hmm.
was more like a generalist kind of approach to the topic,
Yeah.
but it still was a bit for people that okay, like maybe like it was more about like showing people that this is an option, because in my opinion, in general, like school is not necessarily preparing you to get a job. School is like in
Mm.
most cases actually preparing you to learn how to do the job. So and that's not necessarily only for like concept art or like visuals, but like even my dad was telling me that kind of stuff, that like he was learning some stuff from the construction side in the university, but then he had to learn the job when he was
When he
hired
was
to
there.
actually
Yeah.
do the job,
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, there's very few schools out there who now specialize in that stuff. I mean, I can think of two. I mean, you've got
yeah
Derek Zabrowski now, who runs Focal Point, who do specialized stuff for concept design and stuff like that. But you've also now got guys like Antonio Staparts, who are running ArtWad, which is one of the first kind of proper like classroom school things that are working out of like concept design and visual design. But yeah, most general universities don't have anywhere near the level of understanding
yeah
for that kind of stuff.
and then like a good good side of the online learning is that like you can pick the like people that will teach you, and that's like a
Mm,
huge advantage. Like okay, sometimes maybe it's hard to find professionals that are actually willing to teach, because like even from my perspective, I
mhm.
started teaching just to it started with me from teaching at the school in
Mm,
front of people, and it was mostly about me you know fighting my kind of like going out of my safe zone,
yeah,
and like getting more comfortable like talking in front of people, and also help myself to learn some of the stuff, because like I would say that like actually teaching is one of the best way to learn yourself, because
oh
like
yeah,
you need to organize the knowledge that you have. You need to like think about how to share it with
present it.
people and how to present it so it would be
Yeah.
understandable. And you know like teaching at like especially like teaching at a place where there were like the amount like the people were kind of like there was like variety when it comes to the backgrounds, how much people actually knew about the topic. There were like some people that already like wanted to do concept art, but there were also like some people that uh like realized what it is at the like at the like workshops. So
Mm,
uh then me actually explaining some stuff, and like it's kind of like after doing that stuff for like a couple of years, it's like easy to like forget what is obvious and what is not, because
yeah,
stuff that's obvious for me might not necessarily be obvious for somebody else.
starting out. Yeah, yeah,
So and then also presenting stuff and then doing it in a way so I don't feel like I'm, you know, trying to be too obvious like that. That's like having like a balance with that stuff.
Trying not to talk to kids like they're
It's
stupid or like, they're it's like such a basic level that it's insulting to them. Yeah.
but what
I
do
mean,
you,
yeah. I was just
it,
going to say it's difficult. It is
yeah.
difficult. Yeah.
So it's like, I would say in that term, it's easier to do, for example, for me, like some kind of online workshops where
Right.
people already, you know, have some kind of background, and then they actually signing uh, for the lesson, or
Mhm.
like whatever, or like even like, the uh, events like industry workshops, like you might have like variety of people, but like you still can assume that like people have like some level of
Understanding. Yeah.
understanding stuff, and it's hard to not tell stuff that like people will be aware of. Like, so like one of the uh, like best things to actually talk about, like during those events, I would say like study cases
Mhm.
where you can share what was your process during the like some kind of project, or what was the like the challenges that like you experience, because
Mhm.
that might be maybe not mind blowing, but like at least interesting, and
Mhm.
uh, help somebody like to know that like, okay, like that's not only me.
Mhm.
Like I'm not the only one in like similar situation, or like
Mhm.
the, you know that,
I
that
think I think the hardest thing when you do those talks, having talked to people now for 5 years, is that a lot of guys I know who went to do talks think they're walking in to talk to a room full of professionals. Sometimes that's the case, but with a lot of industry workshops, events, and stuff like that, you're mostly talking to students and people who are either in university or about to leave university. So you always have this thing where you feel like the thing you're talking about isn't impressive, or it's really super obvious to everybody else. But then, maybe the people you're talking to have never opened Photoshop, or have never even tried to sketch or try and make something in a digital form. So, guys I met even in the industry workshops 2016 had only exclusively done stuff in their sketchbook. They'd never even went to, Photoshop or any kind of digital medium. So yeah, I think it's hard to, walk up and try and talk about something and not feel like an imposter. It's almost something that everybody feels that,
Mhm.
why am I up here? Why do people want to listen to me? But, you know, you're up there for a reason. So
But
yeah.
like with teaching also, like there is this thing that like at least for me, like when I was learning stuff, sometimes you read something that like seems kind of like that you understand what's happening, but then the application uh, while doing the project, that's something else.
Mm,
So like with certain topics, like I had to spend a couple of years actually understanding some other stuff along the way to
mm.
actually understand how the stuff actually applies to what I'm doing. And it's uh, and, and I guess like it's easy to go into this kind of loop of uh, like how consuming the education, like watching tutorials
Right.
and buying workshops, but not actually doing stuff. It's like it's
So
it's
common. I have
yeah.
folders and folders full of stuff that I've never opened, and I feel bad for it.
Even me, like I'm buying way more stuff that I can actually go through.
Yeah.
But also I need to say that like for me, I also sometimes buy videos, not necessarily for what is thought in the video, but also like
Mm,
to check out how that person is teaching, and like that style of teaching,
right.
and how they're explaining stuff, because uh, at least for me, this like teaching part of my like what I'm doing now, it's like something that like gives me a lot of satisfaction, and
Mhm.
I want to be better at it, and
I mean, it's hard, I think, especially when you look at those teaching methods and think that people have got it down. But I've always said that, like, there's a lot of great artists, but artists don't always make great teachers. It's a hard thing to have. Again, I've talked about Antonio a lot in this podcast, but I think he has a very unique skill set where he is a good concept artist, but also a good teacher, and manages to marry the two so that people can understand how he does things. And I think it's just a lot of practice, because very early on in his career, once he had kind of learned his trade, he was teaching very early and has done it now for many years. And it was the same with guys like, James Douglas, modern day James, when he was doing stuff again on YouTube, the videos he was making to teach people was to help him reiterate in his brain what he just learned, so he would be better. So yeah, I think it's, if it's one of these things that you've not had to focus on very early, it can be troublesome. And also the fact that, like, I think because you've been very studio heavy based for so many years, your focus has always been just on the job and not really the teaching part. So it's a lot to ask.
Like definitely, like teaching, like needs you need to have like patience, like and then like specific kind of patience, like where you're trying to explain something and then that person like maybe doesn't get it, like, and you need to try to figure out some other ways to explain it. And then like obviously studio situation, even if like you are at the position where you need to give feedback to people, like it's completely different case, because that person already got a job, got it because like had at least like this
An understanding
like
of what they're doing.
understanding, and then their skills were enough for the job, at least from the on the like that what's like people along the like recruitment process like thought. So you're already working with somebody that like have some sort of understanding of stuff, but but in the end, like doing that job, like not even like concept art, but like in general, like working in game industry, entertainment industry, and like probably like many different fields, is like the communication is like so crucial. Like, and then that's something that like I like when I was starting out, I didn't necessarily understand it, and then I didn't necessarily like when I was starting like any project, like for example like some freelance gig with like a couple of concepts for the game that like I don't necessarily know much about, and like not knowing what kind of questions I should ask was just like leading me to the situation where there was like lots of changes, like not necessarily changes, lots of iterations along the way, lots of like ping pong kind of
back and
like
forth,
messages back and forth, just to get to the point where I could at the beginning kind of narrow down the options while just asking proper questions. And then that, in my opinion, like having the ability of like understanding like obviously like that part of it is also the experience, like something that you will not necessarily get not working in the industry, because at school there's like it's pretty hard to simulate some of the like the environment of like the actual professional
like
project, because especially if like you have like paid school, people are going to the school to have like a nice experience, and then actually doing projects in teams
it's stressful.
where you need to like like that might be not necessarily like a good experience, like especially that like you have people that maybe you don't like, like it's not like you will like even in the best studios that there might be people that you like you might have like different character, and then like like, and then you still need to work with each other, so
of course. The professional aspect, I think it is hard to teach young students. Like even, I mean, Alex Heath told me way back in a stream he done ages ago, was the fact that he said that the biggest thing he didn't really know that how to explain to people, especially when they were young, was that how you should, on every project you do, you should always do it 100%. Like even if the project is terrible, or like, it's something that you're getting taken on for work and you're not really too super excited about it, but your work's kind of always attached to that thing forever. So you always want to make sure whatever you're doing it to 100%. And that's kind of the professional aspect of it, right? Is that you've always got to try and give your best, even though if you feel like the project isn't great or the people you're working with, you don't really like them, but you still have to do a job. You're still a professional. You know what I mean?
But I would say that it's pretty hard to do everything like 100%,
Oh yeah.
You might like it all depends, like there will be some aspects of the projects. Like if you will have like one week you have like amazing task to work on,
Mhm.
you will be pumped and you will do like 100%, but the next one will be not as great. And this is also the like like one of the topics, like
Mhm.
if you will do amazing job on a task that nobody else will want to work on, you might also end up like just doing like stuff
The
that you
same
don't
thing over
like,
and over again. Yeah.
so you know on one side, like this, giving yourself like the 100%,
Mhm.
it's maybe good, but like I would say, like when it comes to your own uh situation, and then like how to avoid like putting, because like it just like, even when it comes to like the career of like individuals, you know there is like so many like decisions to make along the way that actually can lead you to different like places in the end,
Mhm.
like for example, like one of the things with the, like for example, like starting students, is that like I see that like lots of people wants to start at the the most popular companies, and then they don't
Mhm.
even like the smaller studios. Like I know that like it's not like it it doesn't sound prestigious, or like it's
Mhm.
not like when you don't have the studio that everybody knows, but sometimes you might have like actually better work experience at those like
Oh yeah,
independent
yeah.
studios,
I've
or
talked about that so many times when people like, if you want to walk into working with Blizzard or something straight out of school, like you better be prepared because like, at that level, even with CD Projekt, like people now want to be like, oh cool, I want to go work on Witcher or Cyberpunk as my first like gig. I mean, good luck. Like you're talking like, people at the top of their game working the hardest hours, the longest days, on the biggest tasks. If that's your first experience, it can be overwhelming. It can be scary.
yeah. But
Mm.
but I also like, I noticed that the average perception of like how work should look like,
Mm.
it's the that like like you should have like the work life balance, and then that's in my opinion, that's everybody should like try to reach that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
the amount of people that you will have, like workaholics, and then people that will
Oh yeah,
actually spend way more time on the project just because they like it, that's actually also brings lots of like bad things
of course.
to the industry, like on one side, like those people are enjoying the work, but also
Mhm.
like then it's expected from other people to actually
Yeah,
keep up with that stuff, like so it's kind of like a
balance.
tricky topic
Yeah.
in general.
Mhm.
And applying some like definitely like situation at city project, like when it that's the thing, it's like as a concept artist, like I never actually crunched that much. Like there
Mhm.
was like maybe like few hours here and there, but
Mhm.
overall, like I cannot say that I had like a bad experience. Like for me, and like in the team that I was working at, like I don't think that like anybody was like complaining about the situation. And then you need to also
Mhm.
understand, like that's the thing to understand, is that uh, the whole, like when you have like a studio, like the situation might be different from team to team, and no matter the company, like you might
Yeah.
work with some amazing people, and then amazing lead or producer or
Mhm.
whatever, and then the team next to you might have like a totally different experience at the same company,
Yeah, of course. Depends on the people, yeah, because I've even spoke to people, I'll not name the studio, but, you know, they had a lot of complaints on Glassdoor and people were trying to be very transparent that the studio was horrible, but it was like the entire QA department. And he was like, well, of course, the QA department's going to have some of the worst hours, especially towards the end of the project, because they're getting hit the hardest. But then, like you said, with the concept design team, it's maybe maybe you compared to a game designer, isn't maybe hitting the same things because, once it's handed off from you and it goes into game engine, then you're maybe not touching it as much. So, yeah, it's one of these things where everything's about balance. But yeah, I think it was, you've got to be prepared if you want to hit the tippity top of the industry. You've got to, somebody always told me that if you want a $200,000 a year job, you have to put in $200,000 worth of effort. Like, you have to be prepared to work that hard. And we just recently, before we spoke to you, we had Esben Rasmussen on, and Esben talked about very openly that when he was at Riot, he was very stressed. In fact, a couple of times during his time there, he talked about how he had some mental breakdowns at the studio because he was, the pressure, the workload, things that were going on, even just within the atmosphere of the studio. But like, yeah, it's those jobs seem attractive and they seem like they're a great time, but they also come obviously with a lot of stress, a lot of work, a lot of dedication from the artist. So yeah, which would be the same at CD Projekt, right? If you're coming in as a junior at CD Projekt, it would be that versus a junior at like an indie studio. It's going to be a totally different experience.
I guess like it might depends like on person, and then also like what kind of people you will have like next to you, because if you are actually entering like the environment that like everybody seems to be stressed, then that might affect you as well.
Of course.
Like for me, like changing the job, like that felt like stressful, like, but many like, or even like working with like some freelance gig, like with the company that I never worked with before, like, and then you actually are excited about the project that you're working on. Like, it's very easy to actually put so much pressure on yourself that's basically internal, and then actually read the feedback that, like, especially like in recent time when in recent time when you actually work remotely, even like for the studio, or when you're working on like some freelance gig where you're just communicating through text, it's kind of hard to get the emotions sometimes. So like the same words that like somebody wrote to you, like for you might have like they might have like totally different emotional meaning than for the person that was like sending them. So and then, like I had like situations where I was like starting a project, and and that was like a new environment for me, and I felt like really stressed, even though like I felt like I'm up for the task. But it's also it's very like, I know so many people that have like this imposter syndrome, including me, that
everybody does.
even though like you work in the industry for like so many years, like you still feel like you don't know what you're doing, or like
yeah. I mean, it's difficult as well, even people, I think, when they see it on themselves, but then when they talk to people like you and you're like, oh yeah, I get imposter syndrome, they're like, really? Like you, like somebody who's been at CD Projekt for a decade, and yeah, I think at every level everybody feels it, because I think also it's because no matter how hard you work or how high you get in the industry, there's always going to be somebody above you. There's always going to be somebody better or doing something different or making better pictures, or but then comparison's the thief of joy, right? So like comparing yourself to other people constantly is what makes you worse in the industry. Like your mental health will suffer. Like even some people I know who are just starting out, I tell them like, don't even go near ArtStation. Like really honestly, like maybe go once to have a quick look and maybe get an idea, but try not to go in every day and just constantly just make yourself feel worse, because it does have that effect where every time you go on ArtStation, you look at the front page and you're like, holy shit, like, what am I doing in my life?
I definitely had like that time when sometimes ArtStation, or like not even ArtStation, but maybe some other websites where I saw like some amazing art, was like, there were some days that were like affecting me in a negative way, but there were like some other days that were just like, motivating me to do stuff. Like these days it's like more often the second stuff. So like,
yeah,
actually seeing some cool stuff, I want to do things. But it like, I don't know, like the older I'm getting, like it seems to be like harder and harder to actually find time to do your personal stuff,
of course.
and I have like this problem of I would like to work on everything.
Yeah. You won't got so much timing. You want to have a life, you want to have time away from the computer, and because it's really unhealthy. I mean, I can understand why a lot of people get so burnt out working in some of these bigger studios, because it's a lot to ask people when you're constantly in crunch mode, or you're constantly in development mode, or you want to work on the biggest, baddest projects out there. Like, oh yeah, I want to go work at Blizzard, I want to work at Riot, I want to work at Sony Santa Monica. these all come with caveats that you have to give out a small part of yourself. I'm finding it difficult, particularly because I came into the industry older, right? So I'm 36 now, and just last year I got my first job in the industry, like first proper paid gig full time for that studio in LA, and you know, I'm having to obviously work hard for that. But then, yeah, again, I'm a bit further on in life, so I have a full time partner and a home, and just moved and stuff. So when you're in your 20s and stuff, I think that's a little bit easier because you're possibly not attached, you're single, you're able to travel or move. But the older you get, yeah, your window kind of narrows where you want to have more time away from your work and more time to have a life. So it's a battle, man. It's a constant shift.
Yeah,
I mean, is that something that
that-
you feel now? Is that why you left? I mean, you don't.
yeah.
If it's personal reasons, I don't want to go into with CD Projekt. But is that why you shifted away from CD Projekt? Did you feel you wanted to have?
Like that. There was like multiple there were like multiple reasons.
Mm,
You know, one was like definitely the thing is like uh, I would say that it's actually healthy to change the environment and then go out of the comfort zone from time to time.
right.
And then after like 10 years, I felt very safe and you know
Familiar.
familiar, but also like I lost kind of motivation to do stuff like
Mm,
so. Changing the environment actually like helped me
right.
when it comes to that.
Mm.
Um,
I mean,
but
it's a common thing people would say, right? Like, oh, you work at CD Projekt. Why in God's name would you leave that? Because they're such an amazing company, right? But then it's not just down to the fact that
yeah,
that company is amazing.
but
Yeah.
we also like talked about like this like working on a project and the teams, and then like the bigger the company, it's actually getting the more problems in communication that there
Mm,
are. So you know after like all those years in the industry, like I kind of feel like like working in some kind of like a indie studio with like a small group of people that
right.
everybody has an impact on the project.
Of course.
That would be amazing. Like like I like for example, like it's like a super giant that did the Hades and
Oh yeah, yeah. Love that
last thing.
studio. Guys are
Like
great.
I'm not necessarily somebody that would like fit to that kind of like style, but like I'm a
Mm,
fan of their games and
yeah.
the studio. Like from what I heard,
I
it's
mean, they're 20 people. I mean,
yeah,
it's not a big studio. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
So like
I mean, it's the
having
same.
something
Yeah.
like
I
that,
was just going to
that
say,
would be awesome.
yeah. I mean, I was just going to say it's the same with us. Like with Fabricated Madness, like we're 10 people. And when we do our stand ups or our Zoom calls, like, I'm making decisions on gameplay stuff we're doing right now, and I'm just doing 3D. But like, the feedback is taken on board. Like our head, like our art director, like he's sitting listening to everybody's inputs and ideas and actually taking them on board. And I totally understand where that would come from. Whereas, like you said, if you're having a Zoom call with just your department, which then takes a head, then goes to another department, another email chain, like you're just getting lost. It's like you become a number, less a creative,
Yeah,
team. So yeah.
that sounds great. Like I cannot say that like I didn't feel like sometimes there were like cases where even working at like CD Project, like I had like maybe some kind of impact on certain things in the game. Like
Mm,
sometimes you might do a concept art that actually like bring like some idea to somebody, or like you will show something and like come up with something that actually will you know push something else. Like there are like so many different things that like might happen, but
mm,
like very often when you are hired in a bigger studio, like doing like for example like UI or like low poly, like you will just end up like doing that stuff, and then
yeah.
like and that's not always like the most motivating kind of thing. And then as a concept artist, like you have like I like for example I had like pretty like fun job, because like I was uh, coming up with the visual solutions to like some ideas. Sometimes I had a situation where I had to solve uh, some like maybe issues or like challenges that were like outside of just like visuals.
Right.
Sometimes they were like not even like present in a final thing, but
Yeah.
for some reason we had to like solve some of that stuff, even for ourselves to make better visual designs, for example. Like so. There's that.
I mean, was that kind of? I mean, just maybe touching on before we go, when you were working on Cyberpunk, was that a thing that you felt was difficult moving from such high fantasy to basically futuristic sci-fi, robotics?
I
Was that
like I didn't perceive it as like hard. Like it was definitely exciting, and then
Mm,
maybe I had my struggles, but I was excited, and I actually wanted to work on that kind of stuff, even though
mm,
it maybe didn't go that great from the start, because like
mm,
I was not even aware how little of like sci-fi stuff I did before, like when it comes to characters. Like I did some, but never to the level of like what I was doing like for The Witcher. And then you think that you are like capable of like doing some stuff, but then when you actually starting working on that stuff, then you realize that, oh, maybe I'm actually not as good at this
you
as I
thought,
thought. So
yeah,
I had my time of like learning stuff during the like Cyberpunk, but
hmm
definitely for me was something like exciting and something that was motivating me.
yeah. I mean, like personally, like one of my favorite characters in the game is Dexter Deshaw, and I know you done a lot of concepts for him as well, and yeah, some of the designs and choices you made on guys like that, like I think were
But
incredible and really
like
was.
that's another like thing that I need to um, mm, mention here, that
Mm,
actually like the idea for a character, like I did the final concept for the character, but
mm,
the idea for the character actually came up from the concept that was like the uh, mood board, like key art for like
right.
a scene
Yep.
that like one of the guys from the studio, John
hmm
Liu, worked on.
Okay.
And then he is actually an example of a guy that he finished Fengzu school, and then
Okay.
straight from the school he was hired at CD Projekt.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. As like a junior, like was he coming in as like a kind of
yeah.
like
I'm
level
like
one or
I don't remember like what kind of position he held. If he was like a junior or like a mid level,
right?
but because that was actually like long time ago,
Yeah.
but
I mean, Feng's school is also incredible. Like anybody who has the opportunity to go there, yeah. I mean, it's like people who go to like Brainstorm now in California, like the guys who teach there, and the students they have basically fall straight into studios because same with Nomon, like Nomon, another great school there, but it's because you're getting taught by professionals who are also working in the industry. So that's the difference, is that if you're getting that caliber of teacher, then of course you're going to come out and work, in some big studios and yeah, Feng Studio is definitely an exception, but then it's also very expensive to go
yeah.
and learn at his school. It's I think I was also loving the fact that like Derek, again, as we talked about earlier, his school is I think very affordable, and then even better, I mean Antonio's ArtWads program that's online, it's like €15 a month to learn from him. Like it's so much more accessible. But yeah, it's incredible the caliber of people that are now in the industry, and it's scary now because you see how kids advance so quickly. It almost makes you worried about how quickly you're going to start to feel inferior or like obsolete. Do you ever kind of get that as well?
I don't know. Like I don't necessarily like think much about that stuff. Like
Mm,
the thing is, when it comes to the industry, like the way industry looks now, and then the way it looked like 10 years ago, it's
mm,
like different. Like obviously there's like more people, but like also stuff that people are using for like concept art is like changing constantly, and from just being like primarily like like when I was starting, it was like mainly Photoshop. Like before, like people are also like using like traditional media, like pen and pencil, and
yeah.
like that kind of
Actually
stuff.
sketching stuff out.
Yeah, and then like these days, like maybe in certain cases where you actually like I'm using sometimes like pen and my
Mhm.
sketchbook to figure out some stuff quickly, because
Mhm.
like it just feels more
Natural.
like natural to do it this way.
Yeah.
But in the end, like most of my work is like digital.
Mm.
And then from just being like from just using like digital painting,
Mm.
and then like photo bashing actually got like more popular. Like when I was starting like actually doing anything with photos, people were like calling you a cheater, even though like people in the industry already were using that because
Using
that
it, yeah,
was speeding up the process.
of
Obviously,
course.
it's the way you're using those photos,
Mm.
it's also there is like a right and wrong way of using them.
Yep.
uh, these days like 3D actually changed a lot,
Blender.
like
Yeah.
Blender, but also like doing the like Cyberpunk, like my workflow actually changed a lot, and I use way more ZBrush these days.
Oh, cool.
So like it all depends on the situation and what I'm working on, because it's easy to uh, you know learn new software and think that it's gonna solve all of your problems, but
Mm.
actually
You still need fundamentals.
you need fundamentals, but also like understanding like what kind of like can help you to speed up the process in the end, because it's easy to just like start like I will just like start the concept in ZBrush, and it's gonna be awesome because I don't have to think about perspective and
Right.
forms and that kind of stuff. But then you don't have any idea what to do, and
Mm.
you have like so many different options to
Mhm.
go to. So and like 3D, like, and especially like ZBrush, or like using like that kind of stuff for concepting is very efficient in certain situations, and it's not at all like when you want to do like some fashion design character, like making like fabrics, clothing in ZBrush, it's
Right.
always gonna look kind of like clay. So
Off.
like
Yeah.
you either need to overpaint it, and then
Mm.
when you are actually like skilled in drawing, like you're gonna do the designs like much faster with drawing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's still, even there was a thing where we talked about this with Jan when he was on, and he was saying about how it's one thing to learn how to draw, but then one thing you need also is how to design. Like design is almost as important as your physical drawing skills. Like you need to know shape language, composition, color, stuff like that. That's going to really help you build believable characters that will be in believable situations,
that,
believable clothing.
that's something that like for me it's because definitely these days you can find lots of videos
Hmm.
about digital painting, concept art, and
Hmm.
how to like approach the concept art of like characters and stuff. But there is not much about actual design when
Mm.
it comes to like like when you think about like digital painting kind of videos, and then design, like obviously you have like Scott Roberts and stuff, but and then he's sharing his approach, and then his techniques. But it's really hard to actually find stuff that explaining fundamentals regarding this kind. Like you can find like videos about fundamentals of design,
Right.
but like very often when you have videos about like doing concept art of characters,
Hmm.
it's just about like there are certain rules sometimes, but there is like they are not necessarily explained very well. Like for example, like how you can apply Fibonacci spiral to character design, like how you would distribute the details, and how you would distribute the you know proportions of the character, and then the elements on the character, so it would feel appealing, and also tell some kind of story.
Hmm.
And there are like like maybe like there's how to tell it, like there is like lots to explain when it comes
Hmm.
to how the character look cool, Even like when you look at the like traditional like costumes or like historical costumes, like there is like lots of detail in those, but they are actually distributed in very like specific way, and then like you can apply the golden rules and start, like I can see like golden rule and then Fibonacci spiral being explained very often when it comes to environment design, but like not that often when it comes to character
Character
design.
design.
Even though you can also apply those, and then like character also have their own characters. They have of their own composition as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, character design itself is a whole other subject outside of, like you said, the environment stuff. I mean, the one person I would say that's kind of leading that right now is TB Choi. I don't know if you know Choi at all, but she is out of Korea and was an anatomy teacher back there, but now is working for like Riot and stuff in LA. But her ability to design not only just humans to draw them, but to design characters, like expressions, personalities, the way they dress, the way their clothes are. As a whole thing also, but like it's like I said, there's not so much information about it. And even when I was speaking to Scott recently, because he's done obviously how to draw and how to render books, and now he's working on how to design. He said that's why that book is taking so long, because he wants to not only get it right, but it's one thing that people have asked for over and over again is how to design things, and it's such a dense
but,
subject.
like when it comes to character design, like for example animation, like huge part of it is also like selling the character of that like creature or like person, and then I would say that even in games where you have like realistic style, it's not only about like costume design, like successful character design is still about the character. You might not have this like stylized stuff that actually helping to build the character of that person, but you can even with the visuals of the character, you can sell who that person is. And then especially for me, that's like actually pretty interesting part where there are like some things that are like missing in the story, or like stuff that I can add to the story of the character with my visual stuff. So
I mean, it's something I think people miss so much, and it's something even when we talked about Dexter earlier, is that like it'd be simple things like the glasses he wears are like some of the most expensive glasses, and you can tell from the frame or like the way his arm is, and the fact the whole thing is gold, right? And it has maybe certain motors or things in the arm that are more high level than anybody else's implants or augmented pieces, and that's the stuff that sells that particular character, is that all those tiny wee things, his glasses, his arms, his chains, it all adds up to the overall look of the person. And it's something that you don't learn when you're just drawing heads and feet and arms, right? You don't learn about those tiny wee details when you're doing that stuff.
for me, it's like when I'm teaching like and then talking about like my approach to like designing characters is that like, okay, where you can search the information about the character design, like learn uh, read about, like for example, like fashion rules, like you can learn a lot when it comes to like you want to show like a person that actually knows how to wear and what to wear to actually look nice, and that's like it's rich. And so you probably should apply some of those rules to make this character feel
Believable.
believable. And and then like for example, like that thing with the matching the color of the belt and shoes, like not necessarily exactly the same
Like,
material and so on, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
you
Yeah,
have like the same, like slightly different tone but the same color, the same for I don't know how
how people wear cufflinks on certain arms, or like they'll
yeah,
maybe only wear something on one side, or like
or
yeah.
like how to match the patterns not to feel cheap. Like if you would have like like a jacket and a shirt, and then they would have like the same pattern, that would not necessarily feel
Overwhelming. Yeah,
rich.
yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, it's like you said, it's the extra detail that I think, especially when you get to AAA, like people expect. I mean, when we talk about world building, I mean, Rockstar have always been one of the biggest and best at what they do, and I think it's like all the tiny wee details in their character that shine through, even in their world. Like even something simple as like the latest Red Dead, when you go into some of the stores, you actually browse the products by opening a physical book that looks like an old book, and you flick through the pages. It's simple wee things like that add to the immersion of the world. And it's the same with Cyberpunk. Every street corner, every vendor, everything that like is tiny wee things that are planted throughout the world, and especially on the characters, it just makes a difference.
One aspect of actually working on character design for games is that understanding what's actually possible, or like maybe not possible, but what's going to be easier to execute from the technical aspects of the design. Because like there are like some games that they're not necessarily wants to be the like top notch, like in terms of visuals, and then sacrificing some other stuff. Like, so for example, like I love Dark Souls, I love Bloodborne, Elden Ring, and so on.
Yep.
But then you can see that they don't necessarily sacrificing certain design choices for the costumes. Like, for example, the cape, they don't care if it's actually penetrating the model or not, And then in other games, that would be like, you would look at the game like The Order 1885 or like
1866.
Yeah. So I didn't remember that like that's the part of like like having numbers in a title. When you, but
but the design of that, the character design, that was incredible.
Like, and then like visually that game was stunning, But
Was
like I can tell that probably they were like so many limitations to what they could do. So like, some of the elements wouldn't actually, clip through other stuff, because like
that was a PS4 game even back then.
We had like lots of those things when like those topics, like when we worked on like The Witcher 3 or Cyberpunk, we had to like think about like what's possible, what's not. Sometimes that like, sticking to those rules too much and then not trying to come up with like some solutions to that, like it's like like if you are too safe, you might end up with like same looking kind of designs all the time. But even I had like to I was designing, for example, like the armor for Geralt. That was like one of the Witcher armors, and then I designed this like long kind of dress,
like the bear stuff, the bear armor.
And and then the guys from the responsible for cloth simulation, like coming and like, guys, we need to actually do something with that, because this will be just like stretching all the time, and we don't want that. So like we had to came up with like some smart, like sometimes like even obvious solutions, like cutting that cape in multiple places. It's it seems obvious, but like when you think about it, like and you never actually did anything like that, it's kind of hard to like think what to do, like where, like even where to cut it so it will behave properly. Like
it's funny how one of the biggest mods for Witcher is the cloak mod, so Geralt can have a cloak and a hood. And people are always like, I can't believe they never put this in originally. But then you're like, yeah, that's probably because it was a fucking nightmare to code.
Like it's even like the thing that actually that bear armor was not clipping that much through horse was just like, it's actually, we were just lucky that this kind of thing actually works the way it works. Like when he's actually jumping on a horse, it's not making that much of a problem. It probably still was clipping a lot, but at the moment where like people are actually in the game, like getting the armor, like it's not like you paying attention to those kind of things. Like you pay attention to those things at the beginning, like at the beginning it matters a lot, but the longer you play, then you
don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's even the fact that you think, could you have done Cyberpunk in any other generation of console? Because when you look at some of the cyber augmented stuff where people like basically are putting their hand out and the whole hand is changing and guns are coming out of it, or like blades, or like armor's piercing through it, like there's so many technical limitations, like you said, with just even designing people. I mean, there's so many things that even augmented parts of the body couldn't really function properly unless you had the technology to back up the arms, and making sure the gears could move or things could detach or like move and be independent. And it's like a whole thing. Like I was having this talk with my mentor the other day about 3D design and how we were watching the Unreal 5 presentation, and we thought about, can you imagine a day when people don't have to actually make a low poly anymore. Like, and it's just making something and then just firing it in the engine with no, I mean, obviously there'll be some optimization, but the fact that people might not actually have to make low poly and bake anymore is like crazy.
But that's the thing. It's like I'm not necessarily like a technical person, but I already know that like the like nanite stuff, it's
Mhm.
not the solution for everything. You
course.
don't have like the animation on that. You don't have like simulation. It's like just static mesh that
Yep.
it can have like lots of resolution, but you will not do everything with that.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, Unreal 5 is brand new and it's exciting, but it's going to take 5 to 10 years before anybody's really utilizing it properly within game engines and stuff. So yeah, exciting, but yeah, a long way off for it to be practical.
But definitely it's like a cool tool to actually even do like nice
play around
images
with.
or like just like
Yeah.
try to do some sort of like animation.
Yeah.
Like it's the thing that like if you want to do some sort of like short animation and like using Unreal, like you have like so many resources right now that are free. Like it's way easier
Ridiculous.
to do project like that these days than it was
Yeah.
like 10 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, like even the fact that there's some jobs now that are specific just even just playing with those engines, like world builders. Like even I didn't know that was even a job until I spoke to somebody who was working on a big game, and he's like, yeah, we have people who just take everything you make and just place it in the world and just like build rooms and fabricate them with stuff. But like, yeah, so I mean, they say like within the tech industry, like 80% of the jobs haven't even been invented yet because there's new ones just popping up every other year.
Or like for example, like I don't necessarily remember how it's called, but when you have like this when you were recording like some advertisement or like the way that they did Mandalorian.
When you capture in-game stuff to do for advertisement.
Like where you have like the guy that actually online is just like deciding what to put in the environment to actually figure out the shot and stuff, or
right.
I don't remember like how it's called, but like
I know there's jobs they've got, especially have them in Rockstar for some reason, but they have gameplay capture artists who are people who will go through the game and use what is essentially the camera mode
actually
and take pictures. Yeah.
We had I don't know how it looks like now, but like in like during development of Cyberpunk, like there was like a team of like at least 2 or 3 people like doing like stuff like that. But that was, I don't remember
like
the name.
art kind of thing.
It was like in-game photographer, like
right.
Like for lots of those like kind of positions, like there are no names, and then like official names at least. So from studio to studio, the name for those things might be like
change.
different.
Yeah. But that is a legit job. I know people who have that job who just play the game, stop it, take a photo, and then that photo would be used in some marketing art somewhere for the game. Like usually the stuff that gets sent to magazines or outlets, so people can use
like
those.
That's like one of the issues that like even when the game looks amazing, where it moves, when you have like everything animated, it's sometimes really hard to like make a picture that actually captures that, like what's happening in the game. Like
right.
It's like photography. It's like it's easy to do, but also like hard, like what it's called.
I think it's easy to pick up, but it's hard to master.
Like the thing is like taking like a camera and making a picture is easy, but then making a picture that actually sells you some kind of feeling and then like captures some
storytelling
and then storytelling.
emotion.
That's another thing.
I think it's even the same when people like have a thing where they build environments through concept, and people will say, oh, like, you can draw the building, great, fantastic, but where's the storytelling? And people used to think like, why would you need storytelling in a concept piece of art? But you'd be surprised how much an image changes when it actually tells a narrative, when it actually conveys something,
But that's also like a different thing. Like when you actually when you're working on a game or a project like that, there are like certain situations where you actually doing those concepts that like supposed to tell a story, and then actually share some kind of like mood and show it to people, so everybody would be on the same page what we are working on. But then you have also like production concept art, like of an environment where that storytelling, it's not necessarily the most important part, like where you actually, it's mostly about the design of the object rather than the overall like
What it
story. And
does.
so because like the story is probably already like figured out, or everybody like supposed to know what they're working on, and you're just like focusing on one element at a time. And that's the thing, is like, especially when you're learning stuff like just like looking at the like keyframe from a movie, and then like that there's like lots of stuff happening, there's great composition, everything is designed, like, and then trying to replicate it from the scratch, where like you just don't necessarily know how to like make a proper composition or design a character. Like it's gonna be like daunting task, so it's very often better to start with like something smaller, and then just like build on top of it, like for me, even like designing like a whole character sometimes might be like, especially where I need to sell the details of the character and then show everything in like very great detail, like from different angles, because maybe it's gonna be sent to outsource to make. It's like, it's also daunting task sometimes. So like starting with like even like a shoe design, like looking at the shoe and designing the shoe itself, like kind of even that like might be hard task to do like properly, but it's easier than just tackling everything. And it all depends, because like sometimes when you work with like a talented character artist that can design themselves, and then they don't have to have like every single detail on the concept, that might be also amazing, because like in many cases, like the best thing that you will see, it's just the outcome of the teamwork, and then like input of like multiple people.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a team. I mean, I used to laugh when I used to hear people, even when I went to Lightbox not too long ago, and I said to people like, "Oh, I loved you worked on this, I worked on this," and they're like, "Yeah, man, team effort." I was just one people, but it's like it is lost in you how much you'd rely on the team and how much you're just a small part of that overall huge machine. And yeah, working with the people you worked in at CD Projekt, I can imagine, people would look to you and say, "Oh, Marek's, a great artist, he's incredible," and but then you'd say, "Oh well, yeah," but then the person sits next to me, or art director, or the person like who's my junior, who's really coming up quite quickly, and they're amazing. And it's crazy how you think, how was this thing ever built? When you look around the room, you see all these incredible people. It's easy because you've such talent.
And like in many studios, you have people that you never heard about, and then they have like, they are crazy talented, like
Oh yeah, they have like no ArtStation, no YouTube, nothing at all. Yeah,
like even like they might have like ArtStation profile, but like if they like started their profile like in recent years, it's like way harder to actually get that followers, and then those numbers, like the thing is like, ArtStation might be helpful for getting a job. I know that recruiters these days, they have like profiles on ArtStation, and then they are checking.
They look for people through there.
When we were searching for like freelancers to work on Gwent, I was going through ArtStation myself, and like I can recommend some names that I know, but like usually those people that they're like already, they have like job, like, so getting somebody to work on a project might be like hard, or like especially that like when you need people in like the next month, for example, so you need to like do the list of people and then reach out to them and then see who's actually even available.
Yeah, it's difficult as well. I think you've got a stagnation in the industry where you've so many people in senior positions or high level positions that are now leaving, and I think there's a detriment of juniors. There's not enough people maybe at the bottom level. Do you feel like that's a thing as well right now within games?
Like that, like in most of the places that I work at, that like there was like when I worked like regarding like CD Projekt, like for the most part, it was like the amount of people that you had, like you have like a juniors, mid-level, and then seniors. That was more like a column, for the most. But when the company stops growing, and then people obviously like they're getting promoted, and then CD Projekt, they like, for the most part, like the team that I was at, like the character team and concept art team, like not that many people actually were leaving. So like with the time, you have like actually more seniors than the bottom, you know. But then it's great. Like it's you will not have all the time that situation that will be like new positions. Like if nobody is leaving, and then the company will not have like infinite growth. So like you will end up sometimes with the situation where you have like maybe more people at the top level, like
Right.
seniors, right?
Yeah.
But like it's just because like
You don't need to bring in fresh talent constantly.
but you know, until there will be like some sort of rotation, like people will leave maybe,
Yeah.
or you know, but like you know, I never actually worked in a situation where there were like only seniors, you know. Like obviously
Right.
at CD Projekt there was like, especially in recent years, there was more seniors than juniors, but still there was like some people actually coming in, like when I was working on the expansion packs for The Witcher, I actually had the team, like I was working as like a coordinator. Like it's like it's not lead position, but like you still kind of help managing people, and
Right.
I was like dividing tasks, and then like was the first kind of person to give some sort of feedback. Like, and it was like a small team with like 3 girls that actually, one was already experienced, and then 2 that joined to help with some other stuff at the end of the project, but then they stayed. They were helping with some 2D stuff, like like inventory, illustrations, and that kind of stuff. And then after the project, they stay to actually do concept art and
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of these things that I think because now the industry's grown so much and because CD Projekt, even a studio like that, is so big, I think juniors will be more at, like you said, like you'll go to an indie studio or you'll go to a smaller studio or you'll do a freelance gig for a couple of people. But like people who probably come at the bigger studios now, like CD Projekt, you would come in as a senior mostly or a mid or something like that because, you know, you'll cut your teeth somewhere else. You'll go and work at a small studio and learn your trade there. Then you'll go up and move towards a bigger studio or a bigger team.
You know, like the thing is, like, where you are actually searching for a job and you have people at different level, with the, you know, seniors, it's actually, I would say, way like easier to get a job these days, because there is not as many people as like they are, like the positions out there,
Right.
like and then with juniors, so there on the other hand, and then the internships, when we were like doing internship in Gwen team, there was like 2 spots and there was like 500 applicants, and then there was like maybe 20 people that were like having the skills, but
Right.
it's still too many people, like 10 people per spot, you know. So
Yeah. 20 is more than 2.
yeah, you know, you need to be also extremely lucky, and you know, have that kind of thing that will, you know, like that
Put you
art
above everybody
director
else.
will like, or
Yeah.
whatever, you know, to
Yeah, it's difficult, I think, to find your voice now. And I think a hard thing I've found as well is that people try to imitate other artists too much. You know, like people look at your work and think, I need to be like Marek. But then you'd probably never tried to be like anybody else but yourself. And I think it's hard to tell people to basically draw their own version of things and make their voice very unique, because that's what draws people, art directors especially, to hiring you, right?
I would say that it's like, okay, like it also depends on like what kind of stuff you are searching for in the industry,
Yeah.
because on one side you might want to be like production artist and then do exactly the type of work that the studio actually used to.
hmm
So in this sense, it's actually good to look at the stuff of, like that the artist in the studio already producing, and then kind of look at your stuff and then kind of judge,
Compare it. Yeah.
compare it, and then so on. But like still, you will not be like you just being able to copy people from there, it's not necessarily an asset. Like if that studio
Mm.
needs somebody to join the team, like and then it's about just the amount of work, then okay, you might get the job, but like it's still being able to add something to the team will be like a huge asset, like some kind of like and it might be, sometimes people have like the experience in something else, and then they don't think that that can be useful in a field of concept art,
Right.
like I didn't necessarily finish like the university. I
Hmm.
went to school for production engineering. Like
Right.
I don't even know how it's like. After that, I could like work in a factory as a manager and then like
Mhm.
supervise the production of stuff. But
Right.
along the way, I learned some things that when I'm working on the concept art, like I can go back and look at the stuff from this perspective, and then
Right.
think about like even though I didn't learn that much there, but like I'm aware of certain things because of
More
that,
kind of life skills. Yeah.
so if like somebody was like the most mind-blowing thing is like sometimes people might even finish like fashion school and they don't think that like actually that might be helpful in concept art,
But it is super helpful. Like
yeah.
especially if you're if you're going to be a character designer, especially like that's. I mean, what better preparedness could you have than doing stuff like that?
Yeah, and
So
then
yeah.
that's the thing. Like I was talking with like some guys
Hmm.
from big company, and then they actually uh, were um, actually teaching at like fashion school, and then the
All
main
right.
reason for them to do that was to actually find some potential talents for the company in terms of concept art, because like those people usually had this like kind of thing like that was like original comparing to what you could see on our station on like. And then that's like also another thing. It's like when you look at ArtStation and then the like stuff that like people are posting, even what I have on my profile, like the job is not only about like making those like cool images,
Yep.
but a lot of the stuff that you are doing is just like quick sketches and
Iterations.
iterations and that kind of stuff. And then you have like different kind of cases, but like lots of companies don't actually want you to post that kind of stuff
Of course.
because it doesn't look that fancy.
Yeah. So the sexy pictures.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's. I think it's also the thing that we've had where. I mean, it's a very common thing that's been very common, obviously, just through talks and people talking for many years on the concept art industry and how when you get your art book, that isn't what you're going to be doing every day. That's marketing illustration. That's not something you're going to be doing with concept design. Yeah, some of the stuff I've seen people who have posted like proper concept design, it is rough, it's sketchy, it's stuff even you wouldn't necessarily be proud to put on your art station because you feel like because it's not finished. It's like
yeah,
sometimes a 15-minute sketch, a 20-minute sketch. So
yeah. But
yeah,
like that's like the crazy part is that like sometimes you have like okay, there is like a company that wants to like publish like concept art book, but then
right.
you want to give them concept art, and they are like, we don't want that. We want those illustrations because they look cool.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's difficult for people to try and get the gist of what people will probably looking at within production and what you'd be doing from a day to day, even environment stuff. I've seen people who have drawn, recently in a project I'm doing right now where I'm building out a scene. I basically blocked out in 3D and done a really rudimental sketch in Photoshop, and I thought it looked like absolute dog shit. But the guy I was working with was like, honestly, you wouldn't believe the many people who have handed me stuff like that just to get an idea of like layout in a room or like set dressing. Like it doesn't have to be pretty as long as it can convey the
Yeah,
idea. That's the main thing, right? That's the main thing that
yeah.
we're looking for.
Or like sometimes like the job of concept art is like you're just doing like overpaints of the 3D asset that like somebody is working on, and then
Mm,
something like doesn't feel right, and you need to like do some kind of like propositions like what to change so it would look like on the concept,
yeah. No, I saw that recently even on a documentary when they were making Halo 5, and Sparth, Nicholas Bouvier, was doing things where they got some gun designs back, and he was like, yeah, they're not looking good at all. So he just basically took them into Photoshop and just like painted over them for 2 seconds and just made like the barrel longer or like the scope shorter or
Yeah, but and that actually reminded me of like one thing that I also wanted to mention, that like, you know, you have like this production artists and so on, but you also have artists that I are like maybe sometimes hired by the studio, like sometimes as a like for a contract, or to, you know, do some concepts or images that would inspire other people. And, you know, like for example, CD Projekt was like working with Jakub Rebelka a couple of times, you know, and then he also worked on Cyberpunk. Like he was doing some concepts for the gangs that were not necessarily something that you could take and then do models for the like realistic game, but
right.
you know, that was some kind of like starting point where we could take that and also work on the actual like production ready
Asset. Yeah.
as like not okay, like from that moment, from the inspirational concepts to
Mhm.
the production concepts and assets, that was like a long way, but like it was already some sort of like material that like we could take and then work on, or like maybe look at it and then say, okay, maybe that's not necessarily something that we want to
Mhm.
pursue, but like, you know, and in this case, you know, you will be mostly, for example, hired for what you are doing, you know, like, so
Mhm.
in production sometimes you will be it will be necessary for you to be able to work in different styles and adapt to
Mhm.
what's done in the studio. But there is also like a space for people that they have like their own style, and then
Mhm.
people are coming to them for what they are doing.
Yeah.
It's maybe harder
Mhm.
to actually get to that point, to be like to feel comfortable enough to get the like flow of like, you know, work,
Mhm.
because it will be definitely also harder to find a spot in the studio that would be only about, you know, your style, like, or like, you know, or would be able to utilize like some kind of like specific style. But you know, I would say that that's topic by itself, like what kind of space, like,
How to get noticed by studios and how to have your own
you know,
unique
like
style and voice and yeah.
even inside of studios, like you would have like people that are maybe not necessarily the most imaginative, but they can like, you know, do something very accurately, and then they like can do stuff that will be, you know, very readable. But and
Mm.
then you have like people that can do some crazy ideas, but they are like not necessarily good with like making details, and like, you
Right.
know, like you have like all sorts of people sometimes, and the team, and what's the outcome of the stuff that's done. It's maybe like usually like this, you know, everybody have like a some sort of like different skills,
Yeah.
and then, you know, it's applied to,
To the final product.
yeah.
Yeah. It's funny actually. I was just going, just as we're kind of wrapping this up, but I was visiting today with my partner. We were in an old style country estate, and I was looking at some of the huge paintings they had that were like 20 feet long, and we found out from the girl who was talking about them that one of the paintings in particular, what the artist at the time didn't actually finish the whole painting. He only done certain pieces, and then even maybe sometimes maybe just do faces or like clothing. But he had students who would physically just do hands
Yeah.
constantly on the painting because he found them really difficult. And I was like, that's hilarious, because not only is that something that we all struggle with today, is doing fucking hands, but also the fact that a whole team had to come together to make one painting. And I think, like you said, if you have a unique skill or something that you as an artist have and can do particularly well, it will always find a place. Although it might take longer if you're not maybe as well rounded. But yeah, I think having an individual voice is always important when it comes to being creative.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, right. Well, I've took up enough of your time, Marek. I'm not going to keep you all night. I'm sure you've got plenty to do. But thank you, Cinquia, for coming on the podcast
Well,
and taking your time. I hope you enjoyed it.
yeah, I enjoyed it. Like, it was nice to talk to you.
Yeah, man. Oh, it's always good to catch up. Hopefully, at one point, we'll get back to going to events and we can meet again in person, because it
Yeah, for
seems weird the
sure.
last couple of
Yeah,
years. It's been a long
I would like
time.
to
I'm going to
work with you
try.
again.
I'm going to try and get to THU this year if I can. That's my mini goal.
See, I'm still thinking if I want to go to that one or not. We'll see.
I think you should definitely experience it at one point. It's definitely it's an experience to go. It really is a thing.
I already been to like THU like 3 times, but I also heard that like it changed a lot since then, because like I was on the second one and third one and fourth one. So
right. Yeah, they went to Malta, but they've went back now to Troia, so they're back in Portugal. Because I think they went to Malta and they just didn't feel it was the same, so they went back to the original. But I'm keen to go anyway because I just enjoy the atmosphere there. I think people always, it seems almost like a cult at times, but like I just kind of love the whole, crowd atmosphere, crowd participation. And there's also playgrounds as well that's happening. Berlin's going to be at one point happening as well, so there's a few things to go. I know of course, I think is Promised Land still happening? Do you guys still do it over in Poland? Is that
it was suspended for some different reasons. Then pandemic happened. I don't know what's gonna happen with Promised Land, because like that was technically organized by CD Projekt. Like I was working on the event. I was organizing it with other people, with a team of people like that. Everybody was almost everybody was from CD Projekt. It was sponsored by CD Projekt with like City of Łódź,
right,
and so on. So like I hope it will come back. Like probably I will not be part of the
organizing and stuff.
But still, like,
it'd be good because Europe doesn't have a lot of events. Like there's only so many that are scattered throughout the year.
But actually, there was a moment where there was actually way more comparing to the distance that you need to go through. Like people from US was like, I was talking with some people from US and they're like, okay, we have some like game events and then so on, but like not that many like art festivals. Like or people like from Australia that like they we had like one guy that actually was coming to Promised Land from Australia. Like his family was from Poland, so he was visiting his grandma. But
right, yeah,
no, because there's only as well, but
there's like you guys THU. IFCC used to be a thing. I don't know if that's going to happen again. IMAG and of course playgrounds. So I mean, yeah, because Industry Workshops now has been dead for a long time. So I'd love for that to come back as well. They were always great events.
Maybe there will be some space for some new events.
Yeah,
but, I know that like it's hard topic. It's way more expensive to organize that kind of stuff that people will think.
100%. Yeah, I think if you can get to it at one point in your life in the next couple of years, try and get along to Lightbox in LA because it was a good event. Although it's more focused on I think the fans. But then like it was a lot of good talks there that year, and because it's America, you're meeting a lot of different people as well. So, but Lightbox was fun, and yeah, I've been to all of them at this point, and or most of them. So. Yeah, but at one point I'm sure we'll get together and have a beer. So yeah, if you guys have kept to this point, thanks for listening. We really enjoyed your company. Also, if you want to leave us a like or a little comment on YouTube, we have the video version up there. If you're listening on Spotify or Google Podcasts or iTunes, make sure that you guys can also leave a comment and like and review there. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Marek for giving up his time, of course, and thanks to you guys, and we'll see you later. Bye guys.
Bye.